I'm starting to realize that the thing you said about if you seek God first, the other things are added to you, and I'm struggling with the other things, so I'm kind of finally getting it.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, you've told me that I have felt God, and I'm wondering how you discern between that, and then obviously receiving divine love is obvious, but then there's the feelings you get from spirits. So I'm wondering about like the differences between those things.
Well, firstly, when a person receives divine love, they can automatically sense when another person has received divine love. So you can automatically feel that there has been an event in the other person's life where they did go through this process, where they were humble and they were open to truth in that particular moment. And in that particular moment, they got very overwhelmed with emotion, were in a big mess emotionally, sobbing their heart out. And in that place, they had a longing for God and they received some love. And you can tell when that's happened to a person or when it has not. Secondly, if you then compare that experience with spirit-based experiences, you will find that all of the spirit-based experiences generally seem to, and aside, this is aside from the spirit experiences that connect you to celestial spirits, but all of the other spirit-based experiences, which we often view as spiritual, so we use the term like I had a spiritual experience. You know, an overwhelming spiritual experience is the term we use. Most of the time, not a spiritual experience with God, but rather a experience with a spirit who is just a person who lives in the spirit world. It's just an individual. And here we are with our, our condition, and there's our soul with all of its own emotions. And here this spirit is, whatever it is, male or female, right? So, and it has its own condition and emotions, and under certain circumstances can transmit those feelings to us. And if we have some heavy addictions in certain areas, then, and this spirit's willing to feed these addictions in order to get something in return, that's the main reason why we feed somebody else's addictions, so that we can get something back from them. And then we will feel the sensations as a spiritual experience. But they'll just be a simple interaction between two people. And really, in my opinion, are not very spiritual at all. In fact, if we say true spirituality, I gave a talk recently about what is true spirituality. True spirituality is all about love. That's true spirituality. So if that's the case, then any experience that I have that's out of harmony with love and in harmony with my addictions is not a loving experience, even though I view it as a spiritual one. And I see most people on earth who have spiritual experiences are not actually having loving experiences. They're having addiction experiences. And therefore, they are not spiritual experiences. But they can be quite satisfying emotionally. And this is a problem that we face, I feel, on the planet, is that we're so addicted to getting the things we want inside of us met that we're not willing to examine where we're getting the feelings from. And we want to believe they're from God, when a lot of times they have a lot of dark and very poor motivations in terms of love, very unloving motivations.
Well, I get a feeling sometime, like in the, and you've told me that is receiving love from a guide. Can a lower spirit give you that feeling?
You will feel a similar feeling from a lower spirit. So let's describe the feeling that we're talking about for everyone. So there is, at the back of your head, there's energy point entries where spirits can give you feelings. Does that make sense? Sometimes you'll feel them. Now, right now as I talk, what we'll do is we'll ask some of your guides to give you a feeling. And if you have a sincere desire to do that, just ask for your guide to give you a feeling. And what you'll feel is a lot of like a washing sensation coming, it feels like almost through the back of your head and starting to wash down your body. Right? It's a tingling sensation that many of you feel on a daily basis without recognizing that it's a spirit, actually. Yeah? And it just is a very gentle, generally washing sensation down. Now that's a feeling, and if it's a tingling sensation like that, that's a feeling that is one of two different things. Firstly, it can be a feeling of pure love that somebody is having for you in that particular moment. And your guides love you, and care about you. And so, of course, they are very many times, whenever they have the opportunity, they're going to express that love to you as an emotion, which has the ability to enter you and then for you to feel. So that's really lovely. However, many of the spirits that surround us are actually surrounding us because of our addictions. And those particular spirits will give us the feelings that our addiction demands. And those kind of spirits will often we will feel it sometimes as the same sensation. But the reality is that it's just feeding an addiction. So this is where we have to be honest with ourselves.
Yeah, I've noticed when it mostly happened was when I thought a true thought. Like I realized the truth, so I felt like that was affirmation. Yes, that's good that you realize this truth. But lately there's been times where I'll ask a question and I probably don't want to know the truth. Yep. And sometimes it coincides, maybe not that feeling, but a kind of like, maybe like feeding my addiction to still believe the same untruth.
Yes. So
I'm trying to get better at discerning.
Yeah, and that's a good way of discerning, actually, Enrico, because the reality is, if you look at what's happening, let's say there's our soul, and it's our soul that receives every sensation, and our body just reflects the sensations the soul receives. So we've got the soul of the spirit. Then, obviously, if this spirit gives us sensations when we have the realization of truth, then this spirit is obviously, who's giving us that sensation, is very much in harmony with desiring the best for us. They desire us to know the truth. They desire us to understand the truth. So that's an indication in that moment that that particular spirit who's connecting to us right in that moment is a very loving spirit who's desirous of our best welfare. If you make the same comparison with an unloving spirit, what happens with an unloving spirit is the unloving spirit will connect to us when we have an emotion of error that we want to hold on to. So we might be having a thought that's in error with regard to love. In other words, out of harmony with love. And that's when that spirit gives us a nice feeling. And that's one quick way that we can use to test what's going on. So if you find yourself getting a bit agitated and angry, and then all of a sudden you get these feelings from a spirit, there's a high likelihood the spirit connecting you in that moment is not one of these loving spirits, but one of these other spirits who are just wanting to feed the addiction. If you are having a realization of truth, and it's an overwhelming, sometimes can be overwhelming experience of a realization of truth, and you get these tingling sensations coming down the back of you, there's your spirit friend going, "You beauty, that's another one you've got." And obviously they're very, very concerned for your welfare and therefore very loving. A few months ago, probably 3 or 4 months ago now, I gave 2 talks to groups in England.
It was in
February, yeah, last time we were travelling around. And one of the talks was about the spirit influence of guides and guardians, and another one was about the spirit influence of other spirits who are not our guides and guardians. And I think they're just getting loaded on the net this week, actually. So when they come out, have a watch of those particular talks, because it will help you differentiate the difference between their intentions.
Yeah, I think I understand that more now, but this will probably segue nicely, because the last time we talked about, like, my feeling God, you said yes, you feel God often, but your addictions are preventing you. So if I can maybe ask about that. Because I didn't quite understand that. I'm aware of some addictions, but I have a feeling I'm not aware of all of them that prevent me from feeling God.
Yeah, let's get into this discussion about addictions, because it's very important for your welfare, in terms of getting to know and be with God. Does that make sense? If you don't understand addiction, you will never really understand what's going on in terms of what's preventing your soul from becoming more loving. So let's have a look at that. Okay, so if we look at it, and I've described this many times before to many groups, so you might have seen it before in a video or something, but if we have addiction, underneath the addiction is our fear. So the first thing we need to understand about addictions is they are all constructed inside of ourselves or by others to assist us to avoid our fears. So they're a great way to get away with no longer having to feel our fears. Now,
could we define addiction then as anything we have created that helps us avoid our fears? Because you gave a talk in Sweden recently, and everyone was quite confused about exactly what is an addiction. So.
And it can be physical things. So, example, let's say we wake up in the morning. Most people, when they first wake up in the morning, have had to go through a fearful experience every time they wake up in the morning. The reason why is because we're having to come from the spirit world back into our body, and often around our body there are spirits that we observe that we're not too happy to see, surrounding our body as we're coming back into it from asleep. The reason why they are there is because of our soul-based addictions that we have, and they feel that they can sit around and satisfy them. But many of them don't look very good. In fact, many of them look downright ugly, and scary, actually. So there we are, we're having to come from the spirit world where we're talking with our friends or whatever in the spirit world, and we're coming back to our body, and we have to, every single time we come back to our body, we have to go through this little group of people who are surrounding us before we enter our body. And that little group of people look scary. Some of them are very scary. It depends on what we've attracted in our life as to what group of people. And so we enter our body, and so we're initially very afraid. So we wake up, and what do? Usually we wake up because the alarm's gone off, because we go to work or whatever. Very few people wake up just naturally, unfortunately. So we wake up, alarm's gone off, we've been shocked back into our body, and we've had to go through these spirits to get back into our body. We're already now quite agitated emotionally. So what's the first thing we go for? There's usually two things that we go for: coffee and shower.
What's the common denominator? Just going for heat.
We're going for heat. Why do we go for heat? Because heat lets us get over cold. And cold is always related to fear. You know, when we get afraid, we generally feel a bit cold. And so we go for these addictions. These two here are physical. They're physical in nature addictions in the morning. A good thing to try instead is you wake up in this state, you don't have a shower straight away, and you drink water instead. See how that goes. Because most people who finish up doing that regularly find themselves connecting to quite a lot of their fear as a result, because they're no longer satisfying their fear's addiction to have heat. And to have, in coffee's case, what does it do? It also affects the nervous system quite strongly and causes you to feel like you jolted into activity. Yes? So there's also an addiction to being active as well that's going on. And that's more of a emotional addiction now, isn't it? Of needing that kickstart to be active, and that way when you're active you can be feeling like, let's get up and do things, I feel powerful, and we've now just ignored the state that has been created through the coming back to our body every single morning. That's just an example. Now, the same person wakes up in the morning and there's no coffee. What happens now? Well, for most of the people where there's no coffee and they're used to the coffee, they go into anger. And what do they... Who's responsible for the shopping? Why haven't you bought the coffee? That's what's going on with the coffee. And the anger is always the response, in this case, of the addiction not being satisfied. Now, let's define anger as also frustration, annoyance, irritation, and all those kind of emotions. They're all an indicator that our addictions are not being satisfied. In fact, you can use these emotions as a way to tell you things. So as soon as you feel any even irritation, you go, oh, okay, another addiction's underneath here. I wonder what that one is. You might not know what it is at that point, but at least you know that it's there, because the irritation, the annoyance, the frustration, the anger is telling you it's there. Right? And those emotions will always tell you that it's present. If you have a question up there, so we can just have the mic back there.